old.
Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and former House Speaker John Boehner offer advice about how to proceed with Trump administration investigations following the release of the Mueller report. The two also talked about education and the future of work. From the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, this is About 50 Minutes.
All right, now for somebody who everybody in this room should already know, let me welcome the former U.S. Senate Majority Leader, the co-chair of MGM Resorts Public Policy Institute here at UNLV, and somebody who I get to talk to a little bit later, so I have more things to say about him, and I'll save those for a little bit later. But please welcome to the stage the Honorable Harry Reid.
Everybody. There are certain things we say, words and phrases that are overused. One of those is great American. But I want everyone here to understand I'm going to introduce right now a great American. Rahm Emanuel has a stunningly proficient and efficient background. Rahm was senior policy advisor to President Bill Clinton, elected to Congress and had a meteoric rise to leadership, headed the DCCC, one of the close advisors to Leader Pelosi, and then he became the chief of staff to President Obama. Now, I have watched the tough jobs in Washington. Attorney General, Secretary of State. There's no job that is more important other than the President of the United States than the President's chief of staff. And he was Obama's chief of staff during the most successful Congress in the history of our country. During that time that he was chief of staff, we were able to accomplish some good things for our country. The most important successful Congress, even more so than the first Congress that President Roosevelt came through right after the Depression. We passed a stimulus bill, which was the beginning of bringing this country out of the doldrums of an economic recession that we hadn't seen since the Great Depression. We passed Obamacare, the most important legislation regarding health care since Medicare. American people today are feeling the benefits of that, even though others have tried to tinker with it and try to hurt it. But they haven't been able to because American people so support that legislation. We passed something women were looking for a long period of time, the Lilly Ledbetter legislation that said women should be treated the same as men in the workplace. Now, did it accomplish everything there? No, but it was a tremendous step in the right direction. We're in Nevada. 87% of the state of Nevada is owned by the federal government. The western part of the United States is different than the eastern part of the United States. Public lands are so important. And we passed during that first Congress the most important public lands legislation that had passed in 4 decades. So, Rahm Emanuel, mayor of Chicago, 3rd largest city in America. Now, there are a lot of things that we can talk about that Rahm Emanuel accomplished as mayor of the city of Chicago. But I'm going to talk only about one of those things. We're here today to talk about education, the workplace. And of course, we all know, we've all said it, the key to a good, successful workplace is education. Chicago is I already mentioned, the 3rd largest city in America, 3rd largest school district in America. When Rahm Emanuel became mayor of that city of Chicago, the city of Chicago education system was ranked the worst of a major city in all of America. Well, he was able to change that. It wasn't easy. Tremendous, epic battle between the teachers and Rahm Emanuel, his administration, but it was Rahm that did it. Single-handedly, they write. Now, after having only a few days left in his administration, we can look back, and he can look back with pride, as we all should. Chicago is now ranked as the #1 city in all of America, major cities, I should say, with the best education system. So, Rahm, I admire you. I worked with you when you were the quarterback for President Obama, and you threw a lot of passes. And I have no doubt you will go down in history as the best mayor of the city of Chicago, and that says a lot. And certainly, what you've done, what you did during the Obama years, is legendary. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend of all America, Mayor Rahm Emanuel.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks, buddy. Thank you, Harry. You know, those introductions like that, you wish your parents were here. Because you know your mother would be proud and your father would be amazed. Now, Chuck Todd said we're not going to yell at each other. I lost my voice not yelling at Republicans, but yelling at fellow Democrats, so I apologize. Let me say a little things. I want to thank Harry. I also want to thank Speaker Boehner for putting on this conference and talking about something that I think is the most important thing we can talk about, because really behind income inequality is the gap in education. That's the issue. It is why I ran for mayor of the city of Chicago, and I'll walk through a series of things that we've done to, in my view, prepare people for the future. Just one fact, when I started as mayor, a couple facts. The city of Chicago had a 56% graduation rate. I will walk out with an on-track graduation rate of 89.3%. A couple things. One, and there's a lot of other stuff about data that I want to get to. First and foremost, we live in a time where you earn what you learn. I remember when I was President Obama's chief of staff, even in the height of the unemployment at 11%, people with a college degree never exceeded 4.6% in the worst moment of the recession. So if you get a high school degree, you're going to make that. Community college degree, that. College, et cetera, and on forth. Second fact, I firmly believe this, kids drop out of college in 3rd grade. They do not drop out freshman year. And our goal as a city, we have the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the United States of America. And I made a pledge to reverse that. Oh, half our kids had a half day at kindergarten. We had no pre-K. I walk out, every child now has 4 additional years of educational time than a child a decade ago. Universal full-day pre-K is now the law in the city of Chicago. Universal full-day kindergarten for every child, not based on geography, race, or parents' ability to pay. We added an hour and 15 minutes to every day and 2 weeks to every year. It's equivalent to 4 additional years of educational time. If 84% of your kids are poor, which is the Chicago public school population, who would ever design the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the United States of America? And that led to a series of things. Today, based on Stanford's report, every child in the city of Chicago gets 6 years of education in only 5 years. We lead the country in 8th grade reading, math gains, 4th grade reading gains. I told you about our graduation rate. Simple things we've done to change the perspective of every child. In almost every elementary school, we put up college banners. On the front door of a classroom in kindergarten and 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, the teacher puts up a banner of their college. I want children of all incomes, all backgrounds to have the expectation, not just my children who sit at my dining room table. And you can change children's perspectives. and start to build in it. If you think about what you do with your own children, you talk about college, you talk about future constantly. Kids of poverty do not get that. Fast forward, I'll go to the high school. So I told you about our problem as it relates to graduation. As I said, we went from 56 to 89.3. We also set a goal. Starting this, so it was at 32%. We made a goal that every child, by this year, 50% of our kids would graduate with college credit, and we are on track for that goal. And the single most important thing, if you want to talk post-high school and preparation, you have got to include the high school. It doesn't start in college. The second thing, starting next year, and we've been building towards it, to get your high school diploma, you must produce a letter of acceptance from college, community college, a branch of the armed services, or a vocational school. Every child who gets a high school diploma will graduate with a plan of what they are going to do next, because you have got to build those expectations. And it changed, and it's dramatically changed what the high school years are. And we've brought in a series of things. Now, the mayor in Chicago controls the public schools. The mayor in Chicago also controls and appoints the chancellor and the board for the community college system. It is the second largest community college system in the United States of America. 90,000 kids go there. So we've made high school and community college one area. We have when I became mayor, 500 children were involved and enrolled in what's called dual credit and dual enrollment in our community colleges. You can take college credits. You either go to the school or the teacher comes to the school. I'll walk out, we've grown it from 500 to 5,200 children now take dual credit, dual enrollment as part of their college credit. And all the data shows 95% of the kids who take dual credit, dual enrollment end up going to college. The other thing is we now have the largest international baccalaureate program in the United States of America, which is college accreditation. We have the largest advanced placement program in the United States of America of any major urban school system. High school years have to be rejuvenated and revigored towards the job market and what comes next. Then the biggest piece we did was our community colleges. It had the worst graduation rate in the United States of America, 7%. And if you know community colleges, the average in the country is 25%, and that's what we're on target to meet as I walk out. But we did certain things different. So we have the most diverse economy. Every school then became a sector of the economy that's going to produce the most jobs. So Malcolm X, which is next to the medical district, now does all healthcare. And we rebuilt the entire campus with a hospital inside. It does nursing, EMT, home health care, pharmacy, all the sectors of the health industry. And I then brought in Rush Presbyterian Hospital, Abbott, Baxter, Walgreens, the whole health industry. I said, I want you guys to develop the curriculum. Olive Harvey, transportation, distribution, logistics. FedEx, UPS, Coyote Logistics, all the major ones, Walmart, they run the curriculum. Because if they're going to hire, they want to make sure that the students are learning on their curriculum. Harold Washington, professional services. Wright Community College, IT. But every industry now runs that curriculum. Then what we established, I apologize again for my voice. What we established is if you get a B average in high school, a B average, community college is free in the city of Chicago. Transportation, books, and tuition. All you have to keep is a B average. It is also the only scholarship in the United States from a public sector that a dreamer can get. 81% of the kids, so we've already done it for 4 years, 6,500 kids have gone through the system. 81% of the kids, first one in their family, thank you, first one in their family to go to college. So if you're gonna, again, the only thing you gotta do is a B average. I then went to the University of Illinois, Chicago. It's called the Chicago Star Scholarship. I said, if they keep a B average, will you let them into UIC? He says, not only will he let them in, we're going to give them 30% off of tuition. We have more universities than any other city in the United States but Boston. I went to the University of Chicago, Northwestern, DePaul, Loyola, National Louis, William Morris, all of them. Every school in the city of Chicago now has a program with the community colleges. If the student keeps a B average and has the ACTs, they get 40% off of tuition. We have today about 1,000 kids who are graduating college debt-free. And here's the big thing. When I came into the city as mayor, our unemployment rate was 11%. I walk out with a 3.9% unemployment rate, the highest employment in the history of the city. But more importantly, take Olive Harvey. I made it the School of Transportation, Distribution, Logistics. We built a new campus. North Point Logistics is building a facility for 4,000 logistics jobs, literally 100 feet away from Olive Harvey Community College. Whole Foods Midwest Distribution left Indiana 2 blocks from Olive Harvey, 200 jobs, and now they're going to expand another 100. I can give you hundreds of examples of companies that have expanded, relocated. For 6 consecutive years, Chicago's the #1 city for corporate relocations in the United States of America. And they're in a time in which they always went to Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin, DePaul, Loyola, U of I to find talent. I had 9,000 kids, of which about 35% are immigrants, all right in their own backyard. I brought them in, gave them a seat at the table on the curriculum, and made sure they were part of this effort. The community college system today, if you go back in the history, it was actually the main area kids went on the GI Bill. In Sputnik, we became a country focused on research and research universities. This is going to be the renaissance of the community college system. I was encouraged and heartened to hear what the CEO of MGM talked about the community college system. You have everybody there who's dying to be part of the economy. And I'll give you one anecdote, one story. About early on in my tenure, I was walking down to make an announcement about our mass transit system, and I ran into a young man. I shook his hand. I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to work at Target, and I work in the back of the stocking." I said, "Where are you coming from?" He says, "Harold Washington Community College." I said, "Great. What are you studying?" He says, "Oh, I want to get a business administration degree." I said, "Great." I said goodbye, took a selfie. As I'm walking away, I said, "This young man is doing everything right. He's studying, he's working full time, and he's betting on Harold Washington. Am I doing my job for him?" And the answer was no. And that started the process of reforming the entire community college system, integrating it into the high school system, driving the graduation rate from 7 to 25%. We invited the World Bank in, and they issued a report 4 years ago calling the Chicago Community College System the best college career program in the United States of America. Now, that's being called the tallest midget among a bunch of midgets. And the fact is, we had not done our job as a country. I would challenge everybody to reinvigorate the community college system and the high school system with their educational system. And it's the most important thing we can do to make sure that those who don't go to college, they get an education that still gives them a ticket into the middle class, not just a job, but an area of a profession and a career that they can work their way up. And that's the link between industry in Chicago, community college system, and the high school. The second thing we've done is knowing full well that there's a lot of people that aren't in that school or in the workforce. I call them the byproduct of having the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the United States of America. And we established with Secretary Penny Pritzker when she came home, called Skills for Chicagoland. And that is a skill training specifically to jobs, not going and becoming something where there is no work. In the industry, hotel industry, hospitality industry, the healthcare industry, the logistics industry, truck driving, are all integrated into that skills workforce. So we train specifically. And that's for people that are not either part of high school, part of the community college system, or part of the workforce presently. And that becomes the backup to what is not now or not involved in the community college system. And both of those have led to an incredible growth in the economy of the city of Chicago, not just in employment, not just in unemployment, and not just in corporate relocations. We've had a 21% drop in poverty in the city of Chicago, and across the country in that same time, it's 14%. Other things led to it, like the minimum wage, EITC, but skilling up a workforce has been key to that effort. And I sometimes joke, I started my job 6'2" and 250 pounds. I walk out 148 dripping wet. Reorganizing the community colleges towards what I call the German model, reorganizing our public schools were battles with both teacher unions, not teachers, teacher unions. But I can walk out knowing that if a child and a family bet on the Chicago public schools, today they're more likely to graduate and more likely to graduate ready and prepared to go to college. And Stanford University, Sean Reardon, called the Chicago public schools the #1 public school system of a major city in America. And to me, Harry knows this, John knows this, if you're going to serve in public life, you want to put your thumb on the scales and tip it. It was the reason I ran for mayor. There's a reason I know now nobody will go back and reverse the pre-K, the kindergarten, the full school day, and what I call the renaissance of our high schools. Major urban systems' biggest challenge is the high school years. And our graduation rate and our college attendance, and I leave on this point. In the United States of America, high school graduates go to college at 44%. In Chicago, it's 47. And the kids of our city are predominantly colored, predominantly poor, and predominantly from single female-held household. Every demographic, they tell you that's not possible. And we're beating the national average. And 21% of our kids go to community colleges. And we are on track. 50% of our kids will graduate with college credit. And starting next year, everybody will have a post-high school education plan. And in a period of time where you earn what you learn, that is the best ticket into the middle class. Thank you, and I appreciate everybody's work on this one subject. Thanks, man. Thank you. You got it.
It's not my fault that you lost your voice. Ram did yell at me once last night, so maybe it was that. You know, it's interesting in introducing formally now Harry Reid and John Boehner and thanking Rahm Emanuel, it dawned on me they all three have something in common. They're very straight talkers, sometimes overly blunt. My favorite Harry Reid moment for me is the morning after his 2010 re-election, where he wanted to make it pretty clear that I got an I told you so. And I remember being taken aback. And then the longer I've covered, whether it's Harry Reid, John Boehner, Rahm Emanuel, you start to figure out the ones that are the blunt talkers, the ones that tell it straight to you, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's salty, they're usually the ones getting stuff done. They're the doers. I joke that Congress is 530 approximately elected pundits who are there in Washington to answer the phone for cable bookers, but there are 3 or 4 or 5 elected officials that get stuff done. Rahm Emanuel was one of those. That's why he keeps taking jobs where you actually have to do stuff. Chief of Staff, Mayor of Chicago. And these next two gentlemen are people that were doers and are doers. So I am honored to bring 2 leaders to the stage who's had inspiring careers in public service, and they're continuing through their support of this Public Policy Institute of MGM Resorts here at UNLV. So here to share their personal pathways to work and their perspectives on public service, leadership, and how we can empower American communities, please welcome back to the stage, who's already here, former U.S. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and the former Speaker of the House, the Honorable John Boehner.
Hello, bro.
I think what I was trying to politely say is none of you are afraid of a curse word every now and then, which is probably a way sometimes you can actually get stuff. It's about the only way you can get stuff done in Washington. Senator Reid, let me start with you on this, which is, I thought 30 years ago it seemed like we were on this trend on education to workforce, and this is for both of you, that we were going to make it mandatory 13th and 14th grade, basically mandatory community college through 2 years, all of this stuff. And something stopped us over the last 25 years. What happened?
I think the thing we're still as a country trying to get around, get over, is the invasion of Iraq, the worst foreign policy decision made in the history of our country. It destabilized the whole Middle East. We're still feeling the reverberations from that, notwithstanding the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are dead now as a result of that, and millions of people are displaced. And I think it's been a very, very difficult thing for us to get back to our game when we have this problem that has been facing us.
You feel like too much overseas excursion have taken our eye off the ball domestically?
No, I believe that our great country has to be involved in what's going on around the rest of the world. I am saying the invasion of Iraq was the worst foreign policy decision in the history of the country, and we're still feeling this. More than $1 trillion of borrowed money spent on that war, that situation. And it is taken away from our game, and I think it is, I recognize that John Boehner has done a tremendous amount for education. One of the most important pieces of legislation this country has ever seen was John Boehner and Ted Kennedy, Leave No Child Behind. So it's not as if we don't know how to do it, it's just we haven't had the ability to have the resource to do more good things regarding education.
Speaker Boehner, what would you say of why? Because I really thought we were motoring down that road where basically everybody was realizing we were going to get to 13th and 14th, whatever that meant.
We thought we were motoring in that direction. And then we looked up and realized that we weren't starting early enough with kids. Pre-K wasn't as widespread as it needed to be, and it still isn't. Then we began to realize that our elementary schools weren't really getting the job done. And so it kind of got stopped in its tracks because we weren't ready for it. You know, what's one of the biggest costs that UNLV and other universities? Remedial education for their incoming students. Right. It just drives up the cost of education, and frankly, it should not be necessary. So I think what's happened over the last, I'll say 15, 20 years, is another look. How do we make sure that every child has a chance at a decent education? I don't know that we have the answers to that yet, because the schools are a component. But home is a component, and the communities that the kids grow up in are components. And we as a society, I think, owe every kid a chance at a decent education. But it's going to take all three of those components to make it happen. If you're poor, you live in a rotten neighborhood, there are probably not books at home, there are probably not educational activities at home, and in many cases, not much in the community. That's why I think girls clubs, boys clubs, Friars Club, YMCAs, things in low-income communities, those type of activities are absolutely essential if we're going to do a better job of educating the next generation.
Chuck, one of the things that I think we should all realize is we have all these great ideas for improving education, but the one component we don't talk about often are teachers. And what are we seeing going on around America today? We've seen in West Virginia, we've seen in Kentucky, and a number of other states where the teachers have said, we've had enough of how we're being treated, and we're going to change it. And they've done that by bringing the education system to the legislators and said, you either help us or you're not going to have teachers to teach. And I think we need to involve teachers more. If we haven't gotten the message by what has happened around the country with teachers, taking over state capitals, I think that we should understand, let's start involving teachers in what we want to do to improve education.
All right, I want to pivot to another aspect of what I think government has to do if the private sector is going to be able to do what I think a lot of people are demanding the private sector to do when it comes to workforce training and things like this, and that is, we do have to change whether it's our employment laws, or how health, I mean, one could argue, I talked to one senator about this who said, the systemic changes that need to be made with sort of how, you know, for instance, how we treat full-time work, whether it's how we tax it or whatever, it so fundamentally has to change in order to respond to the demands of the modern workforce, portability, whether it's portability in healthcare, portability in retirement, and all of those things. And this senator said to me, Senator Reid, he did not think that the current state of politics provided an atmosphere where that kind of complicated fixes could be done. What do you say to that?
I think that we've had a lot of problems in our country in years past. The Great Depression, some of the really landmark legislation in the history of our country came about during that period of trial and turmoil. Social Security, wasn't long after that, we had another big problems going on in the country. The aged could not get health care. That's where Medicare came into being. So I think that it's an excuse. We know there's a lot of problems in Washington. We can all talk today about why we have problems there, but I do not accept the fact that things are too much in turmoil, that we can't get things done. I don't mean this in any way to pat John Boehner on the back or pat myself on the back, but some of the things we got done when we were running the Congress, people said it couldn't be done, but we did some really good things. And I think that we have to stop making excuses and just dig into the problem.
All right, but let me ask you a practical thing before I get the speaker to respond. There's many Democrats that don't want to work with Donald Trump under any circumstance. How would you handle that as a leader?
Well, we have many Republicans who don't want to either, but they're just being a little more quiet about it.
But how do you cajole, you know, because look, a big infrastructure investment is really necessary. I mean, the entire private sector is screaming for it, right, Speaker Boehner? Screaming for it. And that's a deal that could get done if everybody wanted to get it done.
Well, you don't really need to get everybody to get it done, because I think, as has been mentioned here today, and you're the one that mentioned it, we have 535 members of Congress. And those 535 members of Congress have leaders. Let's say there's 2 in the Senate, and let's say there's 2 in the House, and that's where the direction has to come. And I think that it's very, very possible to get something done. I think that if we have enough focus on the issues that need to be taken care of and the workplace changing, this is no different than when suddenly people look around and we've got the railroad industry's in big trouble because we've got automobiles. We've got automobiles in big trouble because we have airplanes. And these same kinds of discussion have taken place over the years. And I think we cannot let the dysfunction that many of us believe is taking place with this administration stop us from doing good things. Speaker Boehner,
when you had guns to your head, fiscal cliffs, you name it, shutdowns, you guys did get stuff done. But it took you guys seeing the abyss. Is that what it's going to have to take to do any sort of common work these days?
Well,
make it all a fiscal cliff. If we make it all a fiscal cliff, maybe you guys will do something. Right?
In many cases, it took the pressure of a fiscal cliff or a deadline to get for the leaders to get the members to kind of move along. You know, the easiest thing to do in any job, especially in politics, is to sit there and do nothing. You can't get criticized.
Is that, I feel like the next 18 months, that's what we're going to see.
And so having these deadlines really does help force action to occur, and it helps the leaders lead. And I just think leaders are elected to lead. And I kind of agree with Harry. There's no, regardless of who the president is, You know, a lot of my colleagues, when I was Speaker, didn't want me working with President Obama, certainly didn't want me working with Harry. And, you know, they thought Harry was the devil. I knew better. And, but, you know, we got things done because leaders get elected to lead. And they have to lead. You know, I didn't, you know, Barack Obama and I didn't agree on a whole lot. But we got along because we had to get along. And we developed a respect for each other as a result. And working with Harry, we did get a lot of things done. Some of them were up against a deadline, a lot of them weren't. But when it comes to, as the example you pointed out, the infrastructure issue has to be dealt with. I mean, our roads are a mess. Our bridges are a mess. And
as Joe Biden said, LaGuardia is still a third world airport. So. Yes.
Even though they're trying to rebuild it.
It's second world now. Sorry, Valerie. It is getting second world-ish, but it's his comments help that.
Chuck, I believe, and this may sound unusual coming from a Democrat with the voting record that I had, I think we're arriving at a tipping point. And what is that tipping point? We have taken our eye off of one of the big problems facing this country. We're not talking about it at all. We are driving ourselves into bankruptcy. We have got to do something so that we have, and it's coming more quickly than we think, this huge deficit. We could wind up having $1 trillion deficit in 1 year. And remember, we are only paying the interest on the debt. And with interest rates, they're going to go up. They're not going to be down.
Oh, didn't you see the good news about Social Security today?
Pardon me?
The good news about Social Security Day? They're tapping into the trust fund?
But Chuck, you know, that has come up every year. It's the same. Social Security is going to go broke. There's no question that all of the programs we have that are fixtures in our budgets, we have to look at them and change them. But I am saying now, I repeat, the deficit is going to bury us. And we are going to feel this. And it's going to be something that members of Congress and the leaders in Congress cannot ignore. They're going to be forced to do something about these huge deficits. Otherwise, we will never, ever have money to take care of the deteriorating infrastructure that we have.
I have to say, I'm glad you brought it up. And Speaker Boehner, you bring it up a lot still. And it used to be the deficit hawks. I used to say we're an endangered species in Washington. I think they're extinct. Okay, the deficit hawks have all left. I mean, you two are formers. The fact that you talk about the deficit, not a single Democratic presidential candidate is talking about it in the way you just talked about it. And the President of the United States, who is a Republican, and the last time I checked, Republicans used to call themselves.
He's a populist. He's not
right.
Really
he's not. He's the king of debt, as he once said. He loves debt.
You can't run your household this way.
How is
you can't run your business this way, and your government can't run this way either. And there are a lot of things that need to occur, but we're all living 20 to 30 years longer than anybody ever thought, and 20 or 30 years longer than these retirement programs were ever designed to take into account. And we're not talking about things going to affect anybody currently on the programs, not talking about anybody remotely close to retiring, but these programs need to be restructured. And it's the biggest drivers of our spending, and we all know what the problems are, but nobody seems to want to get around it.
When you visit, when Democratic candidates are all coming to see you, what do you say to them about the debt?
Before we start tinkering with Social Security, let's understand these tax cuts, the latest tax cuts that President Trump trumpeted, have not come to fruition to help the average working American. We have now in America today the lowest unemployment since the 1960s, but yet we have a workforce that's trying to find jobs. So I would say that before we mess around with Social Security, let's look at what's happened with the tax structure in our country.
Before we get into a big debate over this, maybe we ought to get back to the real issue here, and that is workforce development in education. We could
well, but the tax code, you could make an argument the tax code could help with this.
Well, you could, but we've got the lowest unemployment we've seen in decades. We've got rising middle class incomes because wages are in fact going up.
But the anxiety is still there because people can't afford, they're worried about college and they're worried about the next job and they think they're worried that they might get laid off next. It's this weird phenomenon that we're dealing with.
There is a lot of anxiety in America, especially when it comes to jobs and what the future is going to be like for our kids and our grandkids. And I think the best way to lower that anxiety is to have a more adaptable workforce that we talked about yesterday. And how do you have a more adaptable workforce? I think the foundation of that is a better education. And it's pre-K, it's K through 12, it's community colleges, it's universities. I think we've got to ensure that we give a solid education to more of our kids.
I'm going to say something that's probably going to be sacrilege to many in this room. But are we addicted to is it almost like a fetish of ours that we think education's local control, local control, local control, to the point of we've actually local controlled ourselves out of a competitive workforce?
One of the things, and it's a perfect question, it's not sacrilege. The situation is this, and we have many of the leading educators in Nevada are here today. And they have seen, as I have seen, the federal government wash their hands of education helping our university system. Why have the universities had to increase their tuition and fees so high that they didn't do in the past? These state educational institutions are not getting help from the federal government, and that's wrong.
What do you say to this? Is there too much? I mean, we're so sometimes afraid from a local perspective of any outside assistance on education to the point of where I think we're setting ourselves back.
It was the whole point of No Child Left Behind, was to bring more accountability to what was happening in our schools.
They're conservatives in this state still angry with you over it, aren't they?
Oh yes, there are some states that have very high standards. There are states that have very low standards. And frankly, they're doing their kids a great disservice by having low standards. And out of this process, we embarrassed most of the states into raising their standards for what they should expect from 8 years in grade school or 12 years at K through 12, raising those expectations. We're in a better place than we were. But we expect too much from the school system. We don't expect as much from the parents or the communities. And these are important components of making sure the kids get an education. Listen, Harry and I grew up in not the best of circumstances. You know, I've got...
Were you both first generation college?
Yes.
That's what I thought, right? Both of you were first generation college, right?
First generation inside toilet.
All right, that's your mic drop, right? Like, there you go. I didn't have that.
But you know, I got 11 brothers and sisters. My dad owned a bar. We grew up in a little house with one bathroom.
But you had a bathroom.
He's just going to lord that over you.
Well, except that
rich kid, you.
When you have 14 people in the same house with one bathroom, you really didn't have a bathroom sometimes.
How many sisters did you have?
3 sisters.
Yeah, so you didn't have.
So I'm busy writing a book. I have to tell you the story. I was talking to this author that's helping me write this book, and I realized, oh my goodness, I don't ever remember growing up at home where I dried off with a dry towel. Not one time. The only question was, how damp was it?
And who was the last one to...
Well, I don't know. Just a matter of how wet.
But John, we solved that problem. We just didn't take baths.
Do you have hose at least or something? I mean, you know.
We had a party line.
All right. I'm going to ask you one question about the mess in Washington, but I want to ask it to you because you both had to navigate decisions like this. It's less about whether you think it should happen or not. You had to do Benghazi hearings that maybe you didn't want to do, but your base wanted you to do them politically, and they happened, and you navigate that. How does that experience that you dealt with the pressure you got, and you held them off for a long time until you finally said, I can't. It feels like that's what Nancy Pelosi is going through. Does that look like a familiar picture to you?
Yeah, somewhat. You know, what happened with Benghazi is that up until the committees of jurisdiction were doing their job, right, until they weren't. And frankly, when the committees just really wouldn't do what they were supposed to do, I really got forced into creating a Benghazi committee and tried to set it up in a way with responsible members to really just get to the bottom of what the facts were. And so I think Speaker Pelosi is going to be dealing with the same issue. But the first line of she's going to go down, same one I went down. Mm-hmm. Let the committees of jurisdiction do their job, push them to do their job. Some will, some won't, and which will dictate what she has to do in the future.
You were in the leadership when we went through the last impeachment. If you were leader right now, whether it's in the Senate or you're in Pelosi's shoes right now, you've got to make a political decision because you also want to get stuff done. If an impeachment proceeding opens up, does that stop the clock on legislation completely?
I did sit front row seat on the impeachment of President Clinton. And if you look at what happened following the impeachment of President Clinton, his popularity rose dramatically. Didn't hurt him, it helped him. So,
but Democrats didn't win the White House in 2000. And some Republicans this week have quietly said to me, they think impeachment actually is the reason that happened.
Well, I wish it were that simple. I don't think it is. But I believe that the leaders in the House, led by the tremendously good leader, Speaker Pelosi, I think that impeachment is a difficult decision. Some say Mueller's report was an invitation for impeachment, but we have just a short time until the next election. And if impeachment proceedings go forward, and they might go forward, I think this country will be spending an inordinate amount of time on impeachment and nothing else. And I don't think we can afford that.
Even without impeachment, should we expect much out of Congress?
No. No. No, Chuck.
Is there a myth, by the way? Is there a myth? This idea of divided government? You don't get stuff done in divided government.
Chuck, members reflect the views of their constituents. Yeah. And America is divided like this. And it's getting worse rather than better. And frankly, the members listen to the loudest voices in their district. So Democrats hear the left of the left, Republicans hear the right of the right, and they're holding members of Congress hostage to their loud views, preventing people from working together to get anything done. So not much is going to happen legislatively.
Until voters punish elected officials for acting that way, right? I mean, that's basically until the voters punish the behavior?
I don't think so. I think that voters watch what people do, and I think that people should run on their records and not hide from who they are. And that's one reason my elections are always so close, because I just want to get one more than 50% and to not try to please everybody.
Well, we had an interesting conversation with somebody last night who said there was something about that you learn a lot about somebody when they're in leadership. Do they know how to use power? And one thing both of you guys did is you understood how to use power, and power in a way that, in your own views, you were hoping you were advancing the American story. So in that sense, thank you both for your service. And how about a round of applause for these guys? They didn't. They have not. They have not told each other off in what, 6 years?
Oh, we had one little spat. We got over it real quickly.
Well, anyway, this was Senator Reid. Thank you for having me here, and thanks for this. This is This has already been a tremendous morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Lawmakers are finishing